Hello and welcome to this recording on configuring the Sophos XG inbound high availability deployment in Azure. So this video has been a long time coming and it's actually one of the most requested videos that I've had. So weeks ago, Sophos came out with a KB that gave an overview of this HA configuration. But in this recording, what I'll try to do is take that a step further and walk through the deployment and the verification process, and hopefully that helps your understanding. So the very first thing that I would like to clarify in this recording is the title. So the first thing I want you to notice is that this says inbound here. So this is because this video only covers an inbound scenario. There is an outbound configuration, but this is not covered in this recording. I may decide to cover that at some point. If this is of interest to you, reach out to me in the comment section below, and I may consider making this quicker than what I'm planning. There's also a Sophos infrastructure as a service alias that you can reach out to called iaaS@sophos.com. I think I'll just put that over here. So that's iaaS@sophos.com, and you can reach out to that alias also. The very next thing that I would like to point out in the title is what I mean when I say high availability here. So to make that in brief, when I say high availability, I mean active, not active passive, but active, which means that all the instances of the Sophos XG firewall are actually working and processing traffic and providing security for the environment. So the implication of this is that if you're using a bring your own license option, you will need a license for each instance. So let's get into this. So just before I continue, you may also have noticed that the voice is a bit better. So I'd like to say thanks to my wife for the gift of this new microphone here. So the voice will be much better for you watching these videos. Okay, to start with, I'll show you the architecture of what we'll be doing today. So here's the architecture. What we'll have is we'll have a VNet in Azure, a virtual network in Azure, and the virtual network, as you can see, I'll have two instances of the Sophos XG firewall in that VNet in their own subnets. I'll walk you through the deployment of that, and then what I'll do is I'll have another subnet in the backend that will be running a web server that I'll use for the testing and the verification. I'll also have a Sophos SCFM in this case to do configuration management of this, and everything will be clear as we go on. The way that this has been set up is that there are three layers. So number one layers are the workers. That's the instances of the Sophos XG firewalls that are actually processing traffic in Azure. So this layer, which are the workers, will be deploying using a Sophos provided template from the GitHub page. And then we'll have the controller, which will be either SCFM or SFM. So that will be mainly to manage the configuration of the workers, because sometimes it can be really difficult if you're jumping from one instance to another instance, especially if you have more than two, because you can have more than two. Then managing the configuration can be a lot hectic. So what you could probably do is you can use the Sophos XG Firewall Web API to automate the entire configuration if you want to. Alternatively, you could use the Sophos Central Firewall Manager, which is currently only available to partners, or the Sophos Firewall Manager, which is available as either a physical appliance on-prem or a virtual appliance that you can deploy on-prem. In my own case, I'm using a template, a customized template to deploy a nested virtual machine in Azure, and that's what I'll be using. And then we have this tier, which I've called the observers, because the other thing again is sometimes you don't want to be jumping from one worker instance to another worker instance trying to take a look at the log files. you probably want to aggregate the logs, and you can use something like the Sophos iView for log aggregation, or you can ship it using syslog or use Splunk, whichever method suits you best you can use. Let's get into this. The very first thing that I'll do, if I bring up the steps here, is I will be deploying the workers in Azure. So those are the XG instances. Now I'll be protecting and securing traffic. Let's go ahead and deploy that. So to do that, what I'll actually be using for that is I'll be using a template that's provided on the Sophos official GitHub page. So let's go here. Actually, let's bring up my Azure portal. And what I'll do is I'll put that in there. So that's github.com/sophos-ias/xg-azure. So that's something that I'll put the link in the description below. So on getting to this page, if I scroll all the way down, so I'll see the standard template here. If I scroll all the way down though, I'll see the templates to deploy high availability. So if I click on deploy to Azure, if I'm already logged into the Azure portal in the browser, it's automatically going to sign me in and bring me into this page where I can customize the template deployment. So I'll just go ahead and quickly run through the deployment of this. Let's give that resource group name, and I'll put that in West Europe. So give the firewall a name, so that'll be the names of the Sophos XG firewall instances. And what it's going to do is it's going to add -0, -1 onto the number of instances that we have. Give that a password. I'll leave PYOL. I'll select my VM size or input my VM size. So for all the resources that I'll be creating, I want them all in a single resource group. So I'll just go ahead wherever it says RG and just put my resource group name there. Public IP, find the storage here, and anything else, and that's it. Okay, so I know that I got that covered. So virtual network name, I'll give that a name. The virtual network IP address space, I'll give that a /16. The one which will be the front end subnet of the Sophos XG firewall, I'll leave that, and I'll give that a subnet within my IP address space there, and I'll do the same for the backend. By the way, I'll show you what I'm doing here, what that looks like in the diagram in a few minutes. So for the public IP address, I'll need to configure a name for that, which I'll do, configuring that. And the public IP DNS name, I'll need to configure that also. So I'll say 08 because that has to be unique. And the storage name, I'll do the same thing, and I'll give that a unique name, and I'll say 08 also at the end. So the one network interface card of the XG, it needs a name, and the same with the LAN network interface card of the XG instances. Network security group, and the availability set. And this is the interesting part that I want you to pay attention to here. Here is a parameter I can use to configure the number of instances that I want. I'm not limited to 2. I could put in any number of instances that I want, and it's going to be deployed as part of this process. I'll just leave this as 2 for now. I'll go ahead and scroll down and accept the configuration, or accept the terms and conditions, and then click on purchase. And then what I'll do is I'll pause the recording here and wait for this deployment to complete. Essentially what I've just done now, if this deployment is successful, is I've just deployed what I have in this layer over here. And you can see that I've not had to do this manually. This is all provided, it's all deployed using a Sophos provided template. So that's what I've done here. I've deployed 2 XG firewalls in Azure within a virtual network with a front-end and back-end security subnet, and then it's going to automatically create the load balancer, public IP, and all the rest. So I'll pause the recording. I'll come back once this is done. Okay, welcome back. So the deployment completed now. And one of the things that I want you to see is that if I go to under my resource groups, and if I click on the resource group that I deployed all those resources, and you'll see that there are 12 items that were deployed. You can see my XG firewall instances, and you can see that all that is done is it's taken the name that I gave, or the name that I entered as a parameter, and it's added -0 to the first instance, -1 to the second instance. So this is the first stage completed. Let's move on to the next stage. Next stage after deploying the Sophos XG HA template in Azure is I'm going to activate the licenses, but this is only if I'm using BYOL. The question that may come to your mind is, how do I connect to these instances? Good question if that's what you're thinking. So first of all, if I go on the virtual machines in Azure, and if I select the first instance of the XG firewall, and I can see the public IP address here. One thing I want you to notice is the public IP address I have for the first instance is the same public IP address that I have for the second instance. That's because they're getting their IP addresses from what's configured on the load balancer that's in front. So, but for me to be able to connect to that, all I need to do is this: HTTPS public IP column 4444. I press enter to that, and you can see I'm connected. Say, yeah, but I've got 2 instances. Which instance am I connecting to? I'm connecting to the first instance using port 4444. If I want to connect to the second instance, I use port 4445, 4446 for the third instance, on and on and on. So that's the configuration that the template uses. So if I do HTTPS colon // and put that in 4445, this is connecting me to the second instance, and if I have a third instance, 4446, and on and on. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and activate these instances, and I'll probably just log into one so you can see, and then I'll take that offline to activate both instances of the firewall. So I can input my serial number here. I'll pause the recording, activate both instances of the XG. At least you know how to connect to them now. And once I've finished activating them, I'll resume the recording, and then we can go on to the next step, which is to register them to SCFM or SFM, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. Okay, welcome back. So now I've fully activated the licenses, and I have activated licenses for both XG firewall instances. Now moving on to the next step, which says to register the XG firewall instances, which are the workers, to SCFM or SFM for central management. I'll give a quick explanation here. So for me to be able to manage the configuration of my XG instances that are in high availability in Azure, I have different options. Number one option, I could either use the same method I just showed you, which is by logging into port 4445 for the first one and port 4446 for the second one. I could do that and just log in individually and just copy my configurations from one to the other. I could do that. That's absolutely fine if I wanted to do that. But if I wanted to simplify things a bit more or automate things a bit more, I have other options. So one of the options is the Sophos XG web based API, and there's a recording on my YouTube channel for that if you're not familiar with that, and that recording will guide you how to begin to use that. So that's one option that you can use, and just create your configuration template and then push it down to both instances, or if you have more than 2, you can push that down to them. That's very valid. Another option that you have is to use the Sophos Central Firewall Manager or the Sophos Firewall Manager. So what are these two? So this is some things that you need to either reach out to your Sophos partner or Sophos sales representative, and they'll give you information on how to get access to those. SCFM and SCFM, and essentially they do the same things, But the main thing is that SCFM, it's only available to Sophos partners at the moment, while SFM is available to everyone. SCFM is hosted in the cloud, is a software as a service based platform that you can use to manage multiple Sophos XG firewalls, while SFM can be purchased as either a physical appliance or deployed as a virtual appliance on-prem to manage multiple Sophos XG firewall instances. In my own situation, I'll be using SFM. So what I'll do now is I already have my SFM instance active. I'll just get its IP and register my two XG firewalls to use SFM for central management. You can do the same if you have SCFM. So let's go ahead and do that now. So to do that, under the web admin, on the system administration, I have central management here. And on the central management, if you're using SCFM, this is where you configure it. If you're using SFM, this is where you configure it. So in this case, I'll just enable this. It's going to ask me for the firewall manager IP address. In other words, the SFM's IP address. I have my SFM here. I will get the IP address and I'll input that here. And I'll leave everything else at the default and click apply to that. And it says you must provide the administrative details to the central administrator. That's fine. I click OK to that. I go to the second one, which again is port 4445. I think I'll need to log back in. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll log back into this and do exactly the same thing that I did on here. I'll do that on the second one, and then I'll resume the recording again after that. Welcome back. Okay, so now I have the two Sophos XG firewall instances now registered for central management. So from now on, I can move on to the next section, which is the controller configuration. And from now on, all I need to do is accept and configure the worker instances in SCFM or SFM, and then I can begin to do the management from the controllers and don't have to log into the workers. Let's go ahead and do that. So what I'll do here is I'll go to my SFM and I'll log into that. And one of the things that I find instantly is to the top right corner, I have this discover button flashing to let me know that there's some notifications. If I click on that, it's going to tell me you have two new XG instances. And if I go ahead and click add new device for the first one, so that's my firewall number 0. I'll put in the admin username. You can use role-based access control for this, by the way, and create a separate credential for this. So I put in the admin username and the admin password, and I click next to that. So this is firewall 0. Remember that that is port 4444 because they all use the same public IP address. If I click test connection, ensure that that is successful. Before proceeding, always test the connection and ensure that that's all good. If it's not good, do not proceed. Oh, okay. I need to log back in. Let's go ahead and do that again. I'll go ahead and test connection, and connection successful. Only if connection is successful, then you can proceed to the others. I'll just go ahead and click next, 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 and I'll click finish to be done. And I'll just do the exact same thing for the other firewall. I'll click on the plus to add it. I'll put in the admin username and password. And then click next to that, but remember to change the port of this from 4444 to 4445. Remember to do that. And then if I click test connection, that should be successful. And then if you have a third one, you can use 4446 and on and on. If I click next to that, there's really nothing I'm changing. I'll click finish. So once that finishes, now I have my two Sophos XG firewalls all connected. So now I can begin to do configuration from SFM. The next thing that I'll do is I'll create a configuration template in SFM. So let's show how to do that quickly. So if I go on the SFM, and it's the same in SCFM also, it's the exact same process. If I go on the system and monitor, and if I click on the manage devices, I get this option here for template. If I click on template, I can create a new template. I'll just call it Sophos XG HA templates, and I'll click on save. Now this is going to take a while to create a template. So once it finished creating the template, what I can now do is I can do my configuration within this template and just push it down to my XG instances, and they'll get the configuration. So I'll pause the recording and wait for this to complete. Once it's completed, I'll go ahead and show you the rest of the process. Okay, welcome back again. So I think the template creation completed now. So what I can do is I can click on the template here, and that takes me straight to my template. If I wanted to change it, I could click select template here and view template list and go to select template that I want and click on the edit button here to manage template configuration, and that takes me into that template. So I'm in the template that I just created here. So what I can begin to do is I can begin to make my configuration from there to push down. Now before I proceed to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this diagram, and I'm going to go back to Azure. And what I'll try to do is I'll be creating this new subnet and this new web tier subnet, and I'll create a new virtual machine that will have IIS installed so that I can use this to do my tests. So let's go ahead and do that. So to do that, if I go back all the way to Azure, I go under my virtual network, and I'll add a new subnet to my virtual network. I'll call it web subnet, and I'll give it the address range of 10.10.2, and no network security group, no routing table, no service endpoint, and I'll click OK to that. So that should not take long at all. Once that's fully deployed, what I'll do is I'll create a new resource, and I'll deploy a new Windows 2016 server. I'll call it web server 1. Put in the username and the password. And what I'll do is I'll just put it in the same resource group that I've been using, and in the same location or in the same region. I've got that, so I'll go ahead and click OK to that. Virtual machine size, I don't need to select anything that powerful, but I'll just select, you know, whatever for now, just to get moving for now. So I'll go ahead and select, okay, let's go ahead and select something more reasonable. Let's select something much more reasonable. Yeah, this one will do. Click select to them. And over here, what I'll do is I'll leave the virtual network as the normal virtual network, but I'll change the subnet to the new web subnet that I created. So I'm deploying this virtual machine into this new subnet. No public IP address and no network security group. Want the XG to be the one providing security for this. And I'll just go ahead and disable a lot of this because it's just for test. Disable a lot of that. The other thing that I want to add is I want to add a custom script extension that will automatically install IIS on this new Windows VM. So I have a script here to install IIS, and I'll get the command that I'm going to execute to do the installation there. So if I go ahead and click OK to that, and click OK, and go ahead and click OK, it's going to do some validation. Once that's passed, I can go ahead and click OK to that and create. So now that's going to deploy the server that I'm going to be using for testing. And why this is currently being deployed, the issue that I have here is this. So I'll show you. So that's 10.10.254 in the front end, 10.10.1 in the back end. This subnet is 10.10.2.0/24. The thing is, I need the Sophos XG firewall instances to be able to route traffic that's going to that subnet out of its back end. So to do that, I'm going to be using XG firewall routing for that configuration to let the XG know that if you want to route to 10.10.2.0, just route it through the backend. So that's what I'll go ahead and do now. So to do that, I'll go to my Sophos XG instances and log into the first one. And I'll go on the routing, and on the routing I'll go ahead and add a new static route to 10.10.2.0/24, send it to 10.10.1.1 out of the backend interface. So by the way, that's the first IP of every subnet is reserved as the gateway in Azure. So that's why I'm using that IP address. So I'll go ahead and click save to that. And that's done. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other firewall too. I'll pause the recording while I did it. Hello and welcome back. So I did the second static routing configuration on the second XG firewall, but also look at that, the web server completed the deployment. So the web server is fully deployed now. So the last thing that I need to do now is I need to do my configuration on the template and push it down to the worker instances. Let's go ahead and do that now. So to do that again, I'll be on SFM or SCFM. On the template, I select my template and I just go and make my configuration. In this case, go on the web server. Excuse me. I'll add a new web server. Call it web server 1, create a new host that I'll call web server 1 and give it the IP address of my web server. So the IP address of my web server is 10.10.2.4. So that's what I'll configure there. So that's 10.10.2.4 and I'll go ahead and save that. I'll just leave it as HTTP for now because I'm just interested in showing you the functionality of this. I'll go on the protection policies. I'll add a new protection policy. I'll call this web server policy. I'll set it to reject mode, enable cookie signing, enable antivirus, uploads, block lines with bad reputation. So I'm just configuring my web server security posture and I'm doing this on SFM. Then I'll push it down to the XG instances. So after configuring that, I'll click on save. I'll go ahead and create my business application rule. I can disable this default MTA rule and create a new business application rule. So that'll be web server protection template. And I'll call it web server WAF rule. Hosted address will be the port B, which is my WAN interface. And for the domain name, to make it very simple, what I'll do is if I go to my Sophos XG firewall, I'll be using the domain name that's associated with the public IP of the load balancer. So if I go ahead and copy this, and then if I go back to SFM, I can put that as the domain name there. So that's the name I'll go to whenever I want to visit the website, at least for now. I'll select my web server And for protection policy, I'll select my web server policy. So here's one of the advantages of the XG is that it's not only WAF that I can use, I can put IPS on top of WAF, which provides even much more security, because then I have defense in depth configured. I'll enable the option to pass the host header, and I'll go ahead and click save to that. So what I can now do is that once I have this configuration, I can now go on the summary, on the provision template, and I can push this down. So I don't need to push everything down because I didn't make a configuration in everything. So I'll go ahead and deselect that, and I'll just select firewall and web server. Those are the only options, those are the only places where I made changes. So I'll select just those two, and I'll click on confirm. It's going to ask me which devices do I want to push this configuration to. I'll go ahead and just select my 2 XG instances, click apply, and click save. And now it's going to begin the push. I can view the event here, and it's going to show me where it currently at. What I'll do here is I'll pause the recording, and once the configuration push completes successfully, then I'll be back, and then I'll go ahead and do some verification. Welcome back. So the push completed successfully in SCFM. So one thing I would like to mention is that if you push it and you get some error messages, you can just go ahead and click summary and just push the configuration sections again that you want to push down, and that should work. So you may need to push it down more than once. That's absolutely fine. In this case now, if I go and log into my XG instances, and one of the things that we should find is that our configuration is right here now. So we can see the configuration that we did, that's right there. And it's going to be the same on the other appliance. If we log into this, and if I go on the firewall, you can see that the configuration is here. So what I can do then is if I go ahead and copy this DNS name for the load balancer and browse to that and press enter. Now I'm connecting to my backend web server, and I can, I can tell which instance that this is connecting to. By the way, before continuing, let me just quickly bring up this point that there's a configuration that I'm not covering here that has to do with the observer. So something called the observer. So the point of the observer is that you may want to do syslog aggregation or log aggregation. So you can use syslog, or you can use Sophos iView to centralize logging so that you can see all the logs for all the worker firewalls from a single place. In this instance, what I'll do now is if I go back, and I can tell which firewall this traffic is going to. So if I go to the second firewall, I can see that the firewall has no traffic going through it. So that means the firewall is currently going through this instance, which is my firewall 0 instance. So what I'll actually do is if I go back here, just to do some much more clear verification, and then under my Azure, if I go under all services and look for load balancers, and on the load balancers, I should find the load balancer that was created as part of the templates there. What I'll do is I'll quickly add some new NAT rules for SSH so that I can SSH to the appliances. I'll add SSH XG 0. Anything going to the public IP of the load balancer port 22, send it to firewall 0 to the one network interface card on port 22. So I'll leave that as default and click OK. That will take a while to complete. Once it completes, I'll do the same for the second firewall. But what I'll do is I'll send anything going to port 23 on the public IP, send it to port 22 of the second firewall. I'll pause this recording now and then show you once that's completed. So that's completed. I'll do the same for the second one. So I'll say this is SSH XG1. I'm going to port 23 on the front end, but send it to firewall 1 to the WAN interface, but this time send it to port 22. So I'll go ahead and click OK to that. So what I should now be able to do is I should be able to log in to the first firewall instance using SSH. And what I'll do is if I bring up log reverse proxy.log, and I'll do the same for the second firewall on port 23 but still using SSH. If I click OK to that, okay, so now I have these two instances. So this is instance 1 on the right, instance 0 on the left, right? And what I'll do is I'll go back here and I'll just do a quick refresh of my web page, and we'll see which instance that is going through. So that should show up which instance that we're currently using. So if I refresh that, so you can see that that is currently going through instance 0. So again, if I go ahead and click on that and refresh, you can see that that is where that instance is currently going through. So what I'll do is I'll go to instance 0 and I'll go ahead and just shut that down, and then we'll do a quick failover test. So if I go back here and go on the Azure, and forgive me that this is very small here, but what I'm looking for is I'm looking for instance 0, that instance, and I'll just go ahead and click to make a restart now. So once I make a restart of that, SSH got lost, so I'll click OK to cancel that. But what I'll do in this sense is I'll go back to my web server connection. I'll just go ahead and refresh that, and let's see. So the current configuration is set to do health check every 5 seconds, and after 2 health checks are lost, it's going to fail over. So I expect that should happen very soon, and that's done already. So you can see that my first instance has gone down, but my connection to the server is now going through the second instance, and I have high availability in Azure. Once the second one comes back up, it goes back in the pool, and then traffic gets forwarded across boards. And as always, I can go to the Azure load balancer and just modify the configuration to suit whatever I want in my environment. Now, I hope that this has been helpful to you to clarify some of the ways that this works. I hope that now you have a much clearer understanding to know that these are the worker instances deployed using a Sophos provided template, and then we have the controller, which you can either use SCFM or SFM, register the workers to the controller, and then you can manage the configuration from there. And then you can use syslog to ship the log to a central location where you can view all the logs from there, or you can configure the Sophos iView, server to view the logs from a single location. So thanks very much for staying with me in this recording and for watching this, and I'll see you in my very next recording. Bye for now.